Other worlds are within your reach. Visit and explore Christmas Island and the Cocos-Keeling Islands.
I would give it all away to do it all again.
There are more than 8,000 islands off the coast of Australia, but few rival this one for wonder. It's just a speck in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and yet it is literally bursting with life. This is Christmas Island as you've rarely seen it before, in all its natural splendour. All those beautiful crystals that come up in the light. You won't believe how close you'll come to many of its creatures, on land and in the sea. From one-on-one encounters, they look like they've walked straight off the set of a sci-fi film, to one on tens of millions.
The scale of it is just spectacular.
This really is one of Mother Nature's greatest shows on Earth. Christmas Island is particularly multicultural and has been throughout most of its history. But first settler honours belong to the Cocos Malay. They arrived in November 1888 with members of the Clunies-Ross family, who ruled the remote Cocos Islands. They planned to lease this island from the colonial empire and, to stake their claim, established a small settlement at Flying Fish Cove. Their interest initially was in timber, but they soon saw more value in phosphate, opening a mine with John Murray, the man credited with its discovery. Now, John Murray wasn't your typical entrepreneur. He was actually an eminent naturalist who recognised the enormous opportunity Christmas Island presented for science. In the late 19th century, it was one of the last reasonably sized, unspoilt islands on Earth, a 135 square kilometre haven that had never been inhabited by humans. Murray was captivated by its raw beauty and mindful of the need to preserve it. So despite his commercial intentions, he commissioned a study of the island's natural history. The result was Charles Andrews' monograph of Christmas Island, a classic work that effectively established a baseline for a century of ecological research. It goes without saying that a great deal changed once humans were added into the equation, but nature, to this day, rules the roost. the island's unique ecology endures. 63% of the terrestrial landscape is now a national park, and the marine environment on its doorstep is unbelievably pristine. There are wetlands of international importance, seabird habitat that's second to none, and even a niche for this resplendent little reptile, the endemic blue-tailed skink. How each and every organism managed to arrive and survive is the ultimate evolutionary tale, best told by veteran park ranger Max Orchard. How each and every organism managed to arrive and survive is the ultimate evolutionary tale, best told by veteran park ranger Max Orchard.
To get where it is today, geologically, there's been hundreds of millions of years. So essentially we're standing on the tip of a mountain, a volcano that is actually higher than Mount Everest. But at the moment there's only about 300 metres of that sticking out above the top of the ocean.
Islands that have formed in this manner are referred to as being oceanic, and every living thing you see on them has been in effect introduced.
All the species that have arrived on Christmas Island arrived in the same way. They floated in or were brought in by wind or birds or animals.
It's safe to assume that salt-tolerant species like the saltbush, pandanus and coconut palms that dominate the coastal terrace were the first to colonise the island. But as soils developed, other plants were able to establish, providing shelter and food for a host of different animals and birds.
You get this suite of organisms that build up over huge amounts of time.
It is one thing to arrive and survive, another thing entirely to thrive. And of all the creatures doing just that on Christmas Island, land crabs are the most successful. One of the best places to see them year-round is here at the heart of Hughesdale.
This comes from a spring up above the falls and it flows out into the sea. And it's one of the major watercourses on Christmas Island. It's an area where the original basalt rock from the volcano is at the surface. The water can't penetrate into that rock, so it forms ideal habitat for the blue crabs. And it's also a water supply for the birds and all the other crab species as well.
There are 20 different land crabs on the island, the most diverse collection in the world. And because of their remarkable abundance, they pretty well call the shots.
They have a widespread effect on the whole ecology of the island. Their burrows till the soil, their faeces provide nutrients for the soil, and they're selective in the seeds and seedlings that they eat, so they have an effect on the structure of the rainforest that grows on the island as well. They can determine which species survive to large trees and which ones don't.
The biggest trees here in the Dales are these grand old Tahitian chestnuts, with a tangle of places to hide. But smaller trees are just as significant, if not for shelter, then for food. Pretty little grove of palms.
The Aringa palm, which is endemic to the island, and the fruit of this tree is a favourite food of the robber crab.
In other parts of the world, robber crabs are called coconut crabs, and they are the largest arthropods on the planet.
They are actually related to insects, and they've got this fantastic sense of smell. You can see the two pairs of antennas. The big long ones are the sort of spatial ones where they work out where they are, but the two little ones in the front that are continually moving all the time are the ones that they smell with. They've actually got one of the finest sense of smells of any animal in the universe, hundreds of times better than dogs. Who knows, we might have them at airports one day.
And if that day should ever arrive, a word of advice re your luggage. Never let it out of your sight, for these crabs are as light-fingered as their nickname suggests.
Because they just pick anything up that's foreign in their territory and take it away and see if they can eat it.
What have you lost
Oh, anything.
in the years of working?
We've lost all sorts of things, spades.
A spade?
Yeah, they've
Get
dragged
out.
that. And I probably shouldn't say it, but the army have also lost some of their firearms here. The robber crabs have dragged them off into the forest.
Oh, no. Is it true, though, that they could lose a claw and they would actually just grow another one back?
Yep, they do that. The new appendage emerges when they molt, but it takes a number of molts for it to actually grow back to its original dimensions, so it can take them a number of years.
Their ability to stop bleeding out, despite having an open circulatory system, is something scientists are studying in earnest.
A lot of our researchers have been sort of examining this feature of their physiology to see, how it might possibly be utilised in surgery, closing off blood vessels and things like that.
They really are quite extraordinary creatures with an amazing capacity to survive. And thanks to the protection they're afforded here, they appear to be doing that with relative ease.
We estimate that there'd be in excess of 1 million of them, the largest population of the animal in the world. They just got this I don't care attitude about life generally. They go where they want and do what they want. And it's only us humans that hinder them. Otherwise they've got free rein of the place.
Another species with free rein on the island is this one, the enigmatic red crab. And if you're lucky enough to be here at the beginning of the wet, you're going to meet them in the tens of millions. Their annual migration is one of, if not the greatest natural spectacle on Earth. The whole event is linked to the last quarter phase of the moon, usually in November or December, for it's triggered by the wet season rains.
But when the rain starts, the humidity naturally increases, and if it keeps raining, they can safely leave their burrows and do their migration to the sea without having to retreat to a moist environment, because it is
moist.
It's just dripping, yeah, literally.
Without rain, the journey is impossible, for dehydration would surely set in.
Some of them, can walk for up to 18 days. Some of them have walked up to 9 kilometres. And the uncanny thing about the migration is that it's more or less a dead straight line from where they had their burrow in the interior of the island to the coast. So, they deviate around trees and rocks and things, but essentially they follow a dead straight line to the shoreline.
So who leads the masses out of the forest?
The males, of course. They're progressively joined by females.
Once they reach the shore, they dip, replenishing lost moisture and salts. Then they head back into the shore terrace to prepare for a frenzy of breeding.
So the males dig these burrows and then the courtship begins. It can be a fairly rugged affair, and then males fight over burrows as well as fighting over ladies. Out of all this mayhem, the crabs mate.
Most will mate inside the burrows the males have laboriously fashioned, but others prefer to couple al fresco. Either way, once the deed's done, the females are left to brood their eggs in peace. "12 to 13 days after mating, the females emerge from their burrows to dip. Then, just before dawn, on the turn of the high tide during the last quarter of the moon, they release their eggs into the sea. They hatch immediately on contact with the water, 100,000 larvae at a time drifting together to form great clouds that move as one out to sea.
So they float around in the sea as zooplankton, little shrimp-like animals. Then they grow through about 7 molts in the sea, and then they grow into these little animals that they call megalops.
The process takes a month, and during that time, they are vulnerable to predation. But those that do survive come ashore and change into tiny baby crabs.
So they turn from a marine animal that breathes air through gills to a land animal that breathes air through lungs. It works out that we only get an island-wide return probably once every 10 years.
Huh.
And that is sufficient, apparently, to keep the population at a viable level.
From beginning to end, Max assures me the spectacle is simply miraculous, an event that he wouldn't dream of missing from 1 year of service to the next.
The scale of it is just spectacular.
One of the greatest migrations in the world.
It is. It's something to behold, indeed.
Birds are the other really big breeders here on Christmas Island. They are ridiculously easy to see and, I imagine, even more of a marvel to study. This is a dream laboratory for ornithologists, with readily accessible research subjects filling every conceivable niche. Brown boobies in particular just love the place, occupying the only soft spot on the entire coastal fringe.
Fantastic birds, aren't they?
In biologist Mark Holdsworth's heart.
So these are my favourite boobies of all, I think, brown boobies.
Are they?
Yeah, very spectacular.
And, dare I say, sure-footed.
I mean, I look at these sharp rocks and I think, it's not a place I'd want to live and raise a child.
Yeah, it's a really harsh environment. But yeah, they make a go of it. And they seem to be able to get around without injuring themselves too much.
Can you tell the difference between the male and the female?
Yeah, the female's got a yellower coloured beak.
Okay.
And she honks. She's honking now, so that's the female there. And the male's just over the back there. He hisses and has a bluish coloured beak.
The brown is one of 3 species of booby that breed on Christmas Island. The others are the red-footed booby, nesting in the forests in the Middle Terrace, and higher up in the rainforest canopy, the last Abbott's boobies on Earth.
I suppose there's enough habitat type there, and it provides a niche for each of those 3 species, and they've taken advantage of that and are able to nest here quite successfully.
So what else do you have on the shore terrace?
Yeah, the red-tailed tropic birds nest here, just on the edges, mostly on the cliff edges.
Yep.
We've also got the common noddy, that's a type of tern. They prefer those areas because they're away from potential predators, the crabs, and also a little bit of protection from the frigate birds, which are always hassling birds for a free feed. So,
Pirates of the bird world.
indeed. There's a lot of work that goes into it to get a feed out of a booby, and they'll have many misses, so they keep trying. Eventually they get a free feed.
80,000 seabirds nest here annually, but Mark assures me overcrowding's not an issue. In fact, there's so much habitat, land birds feature in the Christmas mix as well, including the Christmas Island imperial pigeon, the island thrush, and the Christmas Island white-eye.
Many of the land birds that are here are very common and spread throughout because they don't have much competition. So we don't have a lot of diversity in the bird life here, but we've got sheer numbers of each species.
Less prolific, however, are the island's endemic predators. The Christmas Island hawk owl and Mark's favourite raptor, the endangered Christmas Island goshawk. Now, speaking of secrets, one of the best kept here on Christmas Island is the fact that this place is absolutely riddled with caves. So if you're feeling adventurous, team up with a like-minded local and head for Daniel Roo. My buddy for the day is Linda Cash.
Believe it or not, this is one of our most accessible caves on the island.
And the reason why it is here is because of the presence of limestone, a sedimentary rock composed of minerals derived from marine shells and corals. At this stage, there are no plans to commercialise caving, so once you're done with the rudimentary ladder, it's all a bit of a scramble. Unless, of course, you have wings.
Oh, you've got cave swiftlet. Oh, we have. The Christmas Island glossy swiftlet, another endemic.
For such a tiny bird, they sure make a lot of noise. But it's not your usual twitter. It's actually echolocation, an effective form of navigation when you live in a dark place such as this. Scientists estimate the island-wide population of swiftlets is somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million. But judging by this mound of guano, I'd say they're grossly underplaying it.
So this is the big surprise.
The Mount Everest of poo. You'll forgive me if I don't climb it.
Probably not a good idea.
Oh. God, look at all the life around it, all the mosquitoes and insects, and look at all those bugs flying around there.
With all that poo confined beneath the swiftlet's favourite roost, moving through the rest of the cave system is a breeze. And the less time you have to spend watching where you're putting your feet, the more time you have to look up. The formations in Daniel Roo are dazzling, the result of water loaded with dissolved limestone slowly seeping through the roof of the cave over millions of years. Stalactites hang from the ceiling, stalagmites rise from the floor, and when stalactite meets stalagmite, a beautiful column is formed. The deeper you venture into Daniel Roo, the more outstanding the features become.
That's beautiful, how the light touches on those formations and all those crystals just appear. It's like a massive big organ pipe structure.
And if all this cathedral-like wonder whets your appetite, consider going further again.
And this cave that we're in at the moment is Daniel Roo Upper, and there's also a lower section that you can dive into. It's quite extraordinary. Oh. You can come in from the ocean, or you can actually go down from the land and dive out into the ocean, yeah.
Whew. That sounds like seriously good fun.
It is.
Needless to say, if you've got your advanced diver's ticket, then you should definitely consider the challenge. If not from the Daniel Roo system, then through Thunderdome or Thundercliff Cave. You can also snorkel into several other caverns that have formed along the island's rugged coastline. Or brave the eerie grotto.
The legend is that there was a Chinese sea dragon swimming past and he heard the Chinese voices on Christmas Island. So he swam through the grotto and came up, and that's as far as he got stuck. If you hear the roar of the dragon, it's too dangerous to get in. Otherwise, it's the most magnificent plunge pool.
Now, once you're wet on Christmas Island, there's a very good chance you'll stay wet, for the coastal and marine environment here is unbelievably pristine. Extending 50 metres seaward from the low water mark, the National Park's marine zone protects 42 kilometres of the island's coastline. Flying Fish Cove is a working port, but there are few safer places to go paddling. Fewer still as outstanding on snorkel. But to get the most out of this sublime undersea world, you'll need to kit up for scuba. Wet and dry adventures head out into the wild blue yonder pretty much every day. With dive sites all around the island, they can always find somewhere in the lee.
So does the fringing reef here go all the way around the island?
Certainly does, goes all the way around the coastline.
With 4,000 dives under her weight belt, it's a wonder Linny Jennings hasn't developed gills.
I've been diving here for about 12 years now, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
There are more than 200 species of coral here, and the shapes their colonies form vary quite dramatically. Their growth is entirely dependent on the ocean conditions, the level of sediment in the water, and the amount of sunlight they receive. But the colour variation you see before you comes from the zooxanthellae, a single-celled algae that lives in the tissue of each and every polyp in a colony. All hard corals have a skeleton that's made from limestone. But the polyps that make up these delicate sea fans are supported by a frame of gorgonian, a flexible substance that's similar to human fingernails. They use their net-like structure to good advantage, filtering plankton as it drifts by on the ocean's currents. They are a real feature on several of the drop-offs around Christmas, as are these wondrous feather stars. They're members of the starfish family, but unlike your more traditional species that move along the ground to feed, feather stars perch with their arms held high, fishing from the passing current. Depending on the species and the health of the individual, feather stars can have anywhere from 20 to 200 arms. Soft corals are here in all their glory, dancing to the rhythm of the sea. And there are fish nearly everywhere you look.
If you were a fish, which one would you be?
Well, that's a good one.
I'd be a lionfish.
You'd be a lionfish?
Yeah, or show.
I think I'd be just a little anemone.
Oh.
A little anemone. A homebody that stays in the one spot.
Needless to say, you'll see both species here, and quite a few more besides. 575 at last count, which, considering the size of the habitat, is really incredibly impressive. A third of the species on the Great Barrier Reef in an area a fraction of the size. Some are solitary characters. Others like to hang with a mate. And yet more prefer the safety that's afforded when you move as one with the pack. Fusiliers are impossible to ignore, but difficult to playfully chase. They're built for speed in order to avoid predators of all persuasions. Black triggers are a little easier to follow and clearly more concerned about eating than being eaten themselves. A great place to encounter lots of small reef fish is the wreck of the Eidsvold, a Norwegian phosphate freighter the Japanese sunk during the Second World War. It's covered in coral, but you can still make out sections of the structure lying on the edge of the reef. There's also a site on the northern side of the island where you'll meet a school of giant trevallies. But if you want to swim with something even bigger, you'll need to visit Christmas Island in the wet.
What's the biggest thing you've ever seen in the ocean?
Well, the biggest thing is the largest fish in the ocean, the gentle giant, the whale shark.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Do you get them up
they're
here?
fantastic. They come here from November through to April, May.
There are no guarantees you'll get to swim with these magnificent creatures, but if you do, well, let's just say you won't forget the experience in a hurry.
And I see them every year, but every time I see them, it's like the first time. They're just beautiful.
Their behaviour can be a little quirky, but it's no match for the scientists who study them.
I've got to say, this is a fairly absurd way to spend the afternoon, sitting in the back of a ute, trolling for a goshawk. But it's all for a good cause.
For science.
Science.
Seriously? He's not kidding. He has done this 100 times. Lured a goshawk into super close range with a stuffed rat that he bought in a toy store. Goshawks are ambush predators who prefer to hang out in the forest. But roadways like this offer perfect opportunities for picking off a fairly easy meal.
They just sit there patiently, and when something comes along, they appear. That gives us an opportunity for us to be able to see the bird.
Right.
So we can check for bands. If it's unbanded, we'll attempt to capture it and put a band on it.
Yep.
But that helps us with understanding their biology. But it's really interesting to look at the demographics of it, the sex ratios and the age structure. So it's really important for conservation to understand that.
Now, catching goshawks, for what it's worth, is easier said than done. But eventually, an unbanded juvenile appears and gives itself up for the cause.
So we'll get some bands on here. Got to watch the talons. Once they grab hold, there's like a ratchet system in their ligaments. So when you get nailed, it hurts.
Banding allows an individual bird to be identified and monitored for the rest of its life with no further physical interference.
You can just see the colours from a distance using binoculars.
And weighing quickly gives our scientists a rough indication of health when compared to body condition.
290 with the bag.
Doesn't weigh very much.
But the females are twice as heavy as this, so they're up to 500 grams. So whether it's juvenile or adult, they're much the same weight.
Right.
The difference is the plumage.
Young birds have a speckled appearance, whereas adults are reddish and grey.
The intensity of the colour in the plumage is brightest during the breeding season, and the more colourful you are and the brighter you are, then the more likely you're going to get a suitable mate.
Their eyebrows are really hooded, aren't they?
Yeah, they're visors, so they can, not blinded by the light above in the forest, trying to look down, so they don't want any sun in their eyes. So.
Right. Have they got that third eyelid that comes across as well? Yep.
Nictitating membrane. Basically, it's a transparent membrane, so they can see all the time. So it's like transparent eyelids that, so they can be flying along and keeping their eye on a prey, and they never lose sight of it.
Wow.
All the time.
What do you love about these gorgeous animals?
They're just so approachable, very bold, and just so easy to work on. They've got a bit of character about them, and so easy to handle, robust. So just a beautiful thing.
Dr. Janos Henneke. For his study subjects are nowhere near as accessible. There are roughly 5,000 to 8,000 Abbott's boobies nesting in the island's tallest trees, but they constitute the last population of the species on Earth, which makes Dr. Henneke's research extremely important.
To protect the birds efficiently, we need to know what the requirements are, what they need, and what the threats are, and we're trying to find this out.
Satellite tracking has become the method of choice, and the technology behind it is astounding.
So that's a GPS logger with a movement sensor, and will give us information on where the bird is and what it does in 3 axis, 3D movements.
To monitor their behaviour in the ocean, they are fitted with time depth recorders.
Diving always means it's going for fish. It's going for or flying fish or squid. So we want to know where it actually dives. Not only what area it covers, but where within these areas there are foraging grounds. The Abbott's booby was always considered to be one of the most pelagic, most oceanic boobies, but it isn't the case, at least when the chicks are small. But they travel very long distances when the chicks are large, but when they're small, they're really surprisingly close to shore. And so the water around Christmas Island are really important for them. So there has to be lots of prey and good food supply for them to raise the chicks.
Tropical seabirds are not the best divers in the world, so the health of the whole ocean ecosystem is critical to their survival.
Flying fish they prey upon is very deep in the water column. So then they need the tuna driving up the flying fish to the surface, that it gets accessible to them. So if there's no tuna, the prey is actually still there, but they cannot get to it. So they would starve in front of a full plate because the flying fish is too deep down.
To see the last of these magnificent birds suffering such a fate would be horrific, a loss few would feel as keenly as Janos.
They're such an old species, older than all the Sulit species. When you look in their eyes, you can see they have a secret. They know the world. They know something of the world we don't know. It's just beautiful.
It's hard to describe, but it is. You see, it's different down here. The air just has more life in it. Sounds touch you, and the light fills you up somehow. Yeah, it's a place that stays with you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it stays forever. That's why there's nothing like it.
It's like love cleanse your soul. Feel it in your veins. Breathe it in, your lungs will stay. It's like love for the first time. It'll all make sense. You know it.
Australia isn't just a place you see, it's a place you feel.